Right, nice one. So yeah, I'm back with another episode of Seen It All, where today we're going to be talking about the Leeds scene, and I'm here with the one and only DJ Lubi. Yeah, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, man. It's a pleasure to
It's
talk
a
to you.
pleasure, mate, to be here.
Thank you, man. How are you today, firstly?
Yeah, all right. Just recovering from last night. I had a big gig on down at the Brudenell, another one of my jazz gigs. So thought I'd take it easy this morning, get ready for the big interview with the man. So ready to go, straight
Nice,
away.
man. Lovely stuff, man. Lovely. So I guess just firstly, if you can just tell us a bit about who you are and what you do in the Leeds scene, basically.
Cool. So I'm a live music promoter, DJ. I do music promo for radio, as you know. I curate festivals and I do radio shows. And this year I'm celebrating 4 decades in the game, in the music game.
Wow.
So I kind of started before 1982 when I was literally a kid, right?
Wow.
Like playing in punk bands when I was at school. But
Uh,
1982 was when I started to do the whole jazz, soul, world music thing. That's when I started DJing seriously and putting club nights on. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. Still here, miraculously, 4 decades on. Weathered quite a few difficult times, and recessions and COVID period and crazy things, but soldiered on. And yeah, so I'm still here, still enjoying it because that's been the greatest thing for me is I have managed to make a career out of the thing I love the most, which is
yeah.
music. I was very blessed, to be able to have done that. So whatever bad bits you have in your career, you always have to remember that you do this for a living. You,
Yeah,
it's,
definitely.
it's your like it's your love of your life, your hobby, whatever, but
Mm.
you do it for a living. So yeah, I've been blessed. I'm very blessed to have been able to do that for so long.
That's amazing. Yeah, huge congratulations
Thank
on
you,
four
sir.
decades. Because yeah, saying that keeping a career in music going for that long is it's rare. Not a lot of people keep things going for that long. So yeah, definitely congratulations on that, man.
Thank you, sir.
And kind of ties into my first question, really, which was what was your first introduction to the Leeds scene, like when you started?
Well, mate, before I started doing, what I do now, like promoting
Mm.
and DJing and that, I used to come to Leeds to gigs because I'm not actually from Leeds. I was born in a little place outside Bradford, which is a
Okay.
sort of little brother city just to the side of Leeds.
Mm.
And even there, I was on in the suburbs in a place called Shipley. So when I was a punk kid, there weren't that many gigs. There was gigs in Bradford, but
Mm.
few and far between. But
Ah,
Leeds just had so many gigs. They had record shops, and I
nice.
was at 15, 16. I was going there for gigs and stuff. And then, like I said, I started punk bands and little post-punk bands,
Mm.
and I just started hanging out with people in Leeds and playing in bands with them.
Nice.
And so it was just always a natural thing that I was eventually going to do stuff there. But
Nice.
but even then, I started with my jazz thing and soul and that in 1982 in Bradford.
Mm.
Uh, and but I was going to gigs still in Leeds, and then I just started doing stuff. About 1985 was when I started doing things in Leeds. It was already pretty vibrant. The jazz scene was kind of, I won't say it's as crazy as it is now, and it's still, but it was kind of already starting to bubble up
Nice.
because, as we'll chat in this interview, the Leeds is now Leeds College of Music was already established, and so there's loads of musicians already coming to Leeds, young musicians, all wanting places to play. Uh,
Nice.
there was small venues back then and promoters, so it was buzzing. And then we had some bigger promoters that would bring all the big names to Leeds, like international artists. So
Okay.
so it was buzzing. Mid 80s was
Nice.
really cool, you know, for a dude from a little town in the suburbs of this industrial city of Bradford, going to
Yeah.
was
What
like,
were what
well,
were the
look at this.
venues that you'd go to back then? Were there similar
So
venues now? Or?
none of the venues that now existed
Oh wow.
back then. So there was no Wardrobe, Hi-Fi Club, no Belgrave, there was no Cellar Bar. And
Mm,
where did we go to? The main place we did our Wednesday nights. I was in this crew called the Dig Family.
nice.
We were like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
jazz DJ and
I was
promoter.
good. That's one of my questions. I was going to ask you
Right,
about.
right. We'll get onto that. But anyway, so
Yeah,
we used to roll every Wednesday night. You know where the Grand Arcade is, where Domino Club is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure.
So across from there, on the left hand side, was a venue called the Coconut Grove, and
Right.
they had like a restaurant on the ground floor, and then upstairs was the Coconut Grove Jazz Club,
Nice.
and down in the basement they had a club called Ricky's Nightclub. So it was three venues, three floors
Nice.
in one. And so we used to do every Wednesday there, live jazz, and me and my mates DJing.
Mm.
And then in '86 I started the first salsa night in the north of England
Oh, wow.
in Ricky's Nightclub in the basement, um, which at the time used to get 50 people, but when I look back on it now, it's like was the first time people danced to sort of salsa and Cuban music.
Nice.
It was like the beginning of something, but you don't know that when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
You and your mates want to play this great music. It's only in hindsight that you go, wow, that was '86.
Wow. That's
So
so
yeah,
interesting.
so there was those places. Where did we go for gigs? The big jazz gigs were it's a place called the Leeds Trades Club, which is at the bottom of Chapeltown Road, but now I think it's something like a communications centre or something, or small business units. But that's where all the big jazz gigs used to be at. West Indian Centre, which that is still there. West
Nice.
Indian Centre, Chapeltown. So
Mm.
yeah, went to reggae gigs there, a lot of world music, African music gigs there. So yeah, that is still around. Leeds University, that's been around for decades as a great venue. So big stuff would come through there.
Mm.
Uh, I can't remember the venues after that. It's kind of in the '90s that these small kind of little venues that we know now
Mm.
started to pop up. Uh,
Nice.
but yeah, so that was the '80s.
Okay.
It was a scene that we caught. There was two things going on. There was like a UK jazz explosion, like we have now.
Mm.
Just a ton of young musicians came up in the early '80s, and side by side with that was people like us who were playing jazz records in clubs.
Nice.
So
Nice.
that was called jazz dance, the jazz
Ah,
dance thing. So uh, and in my case, or in the Dig family case, we loved music, live music, and so we brought them together. So it wasn't just like we played records to dancers, to
sure.
jazz dancers. We put live gigs on. We made that whole thing where
Mm.
it was like DJ based, live music based.
Nice.
I have to also mention at that time I was playing bass guitar. So I
Oh,
used to play
sick.
bass
Nice.
uh, in jazz and Latin jazz groups.
Mm.
So that's why I've always veered towards the live music side, because I used to be a musician. I had to give it up in '96 because I wasn't that good.
Nice. Oh, fair
So
enough.
I found my talents were better in DJing and promoting events. But
Sure.
at the
Nice.
time, so yeah, when I started in '85 in Leeds, it was because I was often pushing gigs for my band.
Right.
Just
Okay.
like yourself, with
Yeah.
with your night, like bars club and
Mm.
that. You're putting yourself on, and you want to make some kind of little musical community.
Sure. Definitely.
That's all
Yeah.
that happened. Is me and my band and my mates DJs wanted to have a place to hang out
Mm. Nice.
where we listened to our kind of music, and then suddenly, in my band I started booking Leeds College of Music players. That's how my links to the College of Music started.
Nice. So that was happening from early then. Like
That was
people.
happening from early. That's
Okay.
how I connected with the College of Music. I booked a sax player to play in my band, and
Right.
he would come down, and his mates would come and watch our band, and then he said, "Oh, so and so on guitar wants to play with us," and he joined the band. And before you knew it, there's only me and my mate Chico on congas who were non-College of Music players. They just took over. But and then what happened is we started putting our band on, we started putting nights on, and we would ask the mates of our College of Music musicians, do you want to do a support? And before you know it,
Nice.
putting a weekly night on. You know,
Nice.
'cause the word gets around and everyone's coming to you and saying, "Oh, can my band play? Can my band
Mm,
play?" Before you know it, you got like enough. You can do like once a week. You know,
amazing.
so it's the same thing we do
Yeah,
now. You know, but it's
sure.
been going since time.
Definitely, definitely. I guess like what were the kind of, I don't know, the more popular types of music to go out to at that time? Was it predominantly jazz and stuff, or
No,
was
no,
it
jazz was underground, mate. So we were
okay?
the underground, right? I
Right.
tell you what was big, mid 80s hip hop was
Okay.
big. Hip hop, rap, electro, that whole thing came in the early 80s.
Mm,
It came in huge. I fell in love with hip hop straight away.
nice.
Being a jazz man, you know, but it
Yeah.
was so new and different.
Mhm.
And, you know, we never seen anything like that. You know, like
Yeah.
two or three guys with a microphone just kind of making up rhymes. With a
Nice.
DJ pulling a record backwards and forwards and making all sorts of noises. And
Yeah.
then with if that's not enough, the visuals of the breakdancing and
Mm.
the whole
Was that a
culture,
thing at all? Was there much like live hip hop and break dance in Leeds?
mate, the breakdancing thing was crazy, right?
Really? Wow.
Crazy. Look, even in Bradford in '84, even before I started doing stuff in Leeds, I had a club night called Wild Style after the
Okay.
famous movie of the early '80s,
Nice.
and the concept was main floor was rap and electro.
Mm.
Wasn't called hip hop particularly yet. I think it started being called hip hop then, and it had that room had its own DJs. So like hip hop, rap DJs,
Sure, sure.
MCs, and breakers. And every week there was a breaker battle between the local crews and crews from Bolton and
No
Sheffield and
way.
Manchester. This is '84.
That
But the
sounds
beauty of this
amazing.
night upstairs, me and my mate Chico had a hard jazz dance session. So it was like hip hop, electro,
Nice.
and jazz in the same room.
Wow.
But no, I mean there was big already like mid '80s. The hip hop there was breaking competitions, there was MCing, there was
Sure.
crews everywhere, man. We used to get a crew from Sheffield, where you grew up, called a
Mm.
Smack 19, legendary breaking crew would come up and battle the two
That's
crews.
wild.
There's the Beach Street Boys and the Solar City Rockers in
Nice. I
Bradford.
love those names, man.
Those names are crazy, aren't they? But and how I linked up with those is like maybe a year or two before. I used to just going around Bradford record buying or whatever. They
Mm.
were breaking outside the department stores in the
Nice.
city centre. 82,
Nice.
83, big beatbox, Lino. I mean, these local kids in a northern in industrial town. That's how big hip hop's reach
Mm.
was. When it first
Amazing.
broke.
Oh, I wish that was still a thing today with the break dancing, man. I'd love
It's
to
yeah.
see.
The thing that is amazing about breaking. I don't want to go off tangent too much here, but
Sure, sure.
that hip hop culture has stayed alive, whether it's MCing or
Mm.
breakdancing,
Sure.
or DJing, but it's kind of passed on to net new generations. Like
Mm.
you're an MC yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This is a
Yeah.
this is a culture that started over 40 years ago, but
Yeah.
it's sort of still draws in young people.
Yeah.
Now, in contrast, that jazz dance scene that I talked about,
Mm.
that was buzzing early mid 80s, like
Nice.
young guys throwing down moves, fast footwork, but it never progressed. It was
Okay.
very underground. It didn't sort of, it was a very niche scene. It didn't seem to be open,
Mm.
and it kind of just, that generation just stayed with it. So now you go to a jazz dance session, it's guys my age doing moves and putting Voltarol on their knees and stuff. But no, what I mean, the mainstream music at the time would have been that kind of post-punk
Sure.
pop vibe.
Mm.
I don't know, just pop music. If you went to a big mainstream club,
Mm.
you would hear like the tail end of disco, I suppose.
Okay.
Um,
Sure, sure.
the next big thing that came in was house music. Came in about
Right.
80, 88, 87, 88, and that I remember absolute like rap and hip hop. That kind of just blew up,
Really. Wow.
huge, you know. But
That's
that's another world.
sure.
You
No,
know
for
me,
sure.
I'm Mr. Underground. I'm like a ball in a hole, you know. I'm down.
Oh man, but it's interesting you said about like the post-punk stuff and said you kind of started with more like post-punky stuff and
Oh,
then
absolutely came.
transitioned. What made that
Absolutely.
transition happen? Was it the Leeds scene or was it other influence that kind
Nah, it was that change started before I kind of started doing stuff in Leeds. Um, so yeah, when I was 14, 15, I loved the Sex Pistols and the Clash, the Damned and the Ramones, you know. And but then like when I was 16, 17, you know, when it's only like 2 or 3 years, but your musical taste changed so much as you mature. And a lot of these post-punk bands, late 70s, they were bringing in elements. Some of them were bringing in elements of rap, not rap, sorry, reggae and dub. Some of them were bringing in elements of funk, and some of them were bringing in elements of jazz. You know,
right, okay.
tenor sax solos over this heavy punk funk beat, and I started kind of just like being interested in that sax sound. And in the interviews, the guys in the sax players in these bands would quote people. They say, "Oh yeah, influences. My influences are John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman," and that kind of. I just me personally went off to kind of find out who were these people, and just somehow I remember it's like mid '79 or something. A mate at school was in the lower sixth form. We're chatting about punk, post-punk, jazz, and I remember there were 3 or 4 of us sitting around. We all used to read the music papers, New
Sure.
Musical Express. They don't exist now. Sounds and
Right.
that. Had a little music corner. It was the music geeks. No one else talked to us, you know. And I remember chatting and saying, "Oh, I've got to check some of these guys out." And then this kid, Paul Sedgwick, he said, "Oh, I've got a couple of jazz albums at home. My sister left them. She moved out. You can borrow them to tape them." That's how long ago it was. Cassette tape them. So I brought them in the next morning, and it was the John Coltrane album, "I Love Supreme," which is one of John Coltrane's greatest LPs. And the other one was "Bitches Brew" by Miles Davis, one of Miles's greatest electric jazz records. And those 2 records then changed my life. It was like, what's this? Just like when I was 14 and I heard "New Rose" by the Damned, that changed my life. It's like, what's this? I got to find out what's this. Those 2 records, straight down to Bradford Central Library music section, Encyclopedia of Jazz, John Coltrane, whoa, you know. And then straight downstairs we had a record library, right? You know, where you could take records out. John Coltrane, right? I'm having those. Ornette Coleman, Miles Davis, take them home, tape them, bring them back. And that was it. That's how the journey started. So it went from punk to sort of post-punk to punk jazz to pretty far out jazz at first, because I was drawn to that, you know, crazy free jazz. Because it's got that energy of punk.
Sure, I guess if you are transitioning from punk, it makes sense.
Got that energy, as opposed to Miles Davis kind of blue, kind of that nice, beautiful, melodic, soft, chill vibe. That came later. You know. So that's how it was. And it's really ironic that in the Leeds scene today, that post-punk thing is well and truly alive in bands like Viper Time, Squidding, these boys, the Tight Lines Collective. It's so funny that my life's gone full circle. I'm putting on post-punk bands, you know. It's kind of sort of it's a nice sort of thing, you know. It's a nice circle to sort of square, but that's how it happened. But like by 82, I would say the whole post-punk thing transformed totally into a jazz man, you know.
And then also with the DJing and the salsa stuff, like how did that come about?
The salsa's so I keep that Latin music, Cuban thing. So salsa, Latin music, Cuban music, jazz it's all part of the African diaspora, musical diaspora, right? It all comes from Africa, whether, you know, it's tied in with slavery, like the slaves that went to the USA that's how the blues started. Then the ones who went to South America, you know, Brazil is how Brazilian music began. and Cuban music was the same. And Cuban music evolved because of the African slaves, musical influences and instruments merging with their Spanish colonialist European classical music instruments and pianos and guitars. And that's how modern Cuban music started.
Right.
Then in the 20s and 30s, that music went with immigrants to New York, and then you had this culture, not a clash, but a fusion of modern jazz and Cuban music.
Oh wow!
Came together, and that over the years will become what's known as salsa. When I was getting deeply into jazz and doing my research in Bradford Library, like, oh wow, this is amazing. Eventually, you're reading, learning about modern jazz, so it'll take you to Latin jazz, and through Latin jazz, you will then kind of find your way to salsa.
Right.
As well as the fact that as soon as I heard my first Latin record, I was like, oh, it's crazy. the rhythm, you know, it's just like, I fell in love with it, but it started with jazz, and through jazz, finding Latin jazz, and then just jumping straight into the Latin music world.
Nice.
So like, there's been these two kind of pathways in my life. There's the jazz, soul, that side, and then the Latin side, which I love equally.
Nice.
You know, and they are linked because they both have roots in Africa. So
no, fair enough. That's amazing. Also, and with DJing then, so how did that start?
Well, DJing, I just started buying a lot of Latin records.
Right.
I could never play them out.
Sure.
I played some really fast Latin jazz, you know, for jazz dancers, but I started buying salsa records. And I remember saying to the guy that owned that club I mentioned, Ricky's Club, oh, I wish I could play my salsa records. And he said, well, why don't you do a night?
Nice.
You know, it's that whole DIY, I think, that we still see in the Leeds scene.
Okay.
Why don't you do a night? So I said, okay. I didn't feel I could do a whole night of salsa. It was 1986. I knew 3 Chilean people in Leeds. You know, it was like we don't have a big Latino. We didn't then. We do have a bigger Latino community now. So I got some mates who play African music. I said, let's do like an Afro Latin night, and that's what we started, Club Afro Latino.
Nice.
And so that was just because I wanted to play these records. And I just wanted to play them in a club with a big system and hopefully make some people dance. So that's how it started. Nice. Little was I to know that it would lead me to, like, you know, doing stuff in the 90s where I would bring bands from New York, salsa bands from Cuba. And in the 2000s, I traveled all over the world as a salsa DJ. You know,
I didn't know that.
Mate, I've done like 50 salsa Cuban music compilations.
Wow.
Label. So, but it all started with that first night down the Grand Arcade in October 1986. But
that's great.
You can't foresee these things.
Sure.
Like I said, when you start something, or you're at the beginning of something that starts really small, it's only later that you look back and you think, wow, that was something really special.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing to hear, because like, I often think I'm kind of currently at the process of starting things very new, and you know, with Bars Club and with the music career. So just to hear that perspective is very nice and like very, very refreshing.
I think it's always got to be, for me, everything that's worked for me has always been about community. And what you're striving to get, but it's always just everything good starts with just a few people with a like-minded kind of ideas. Don't matter if it's art, politics, music, and then it's that enthusiasm and that love of whatever it is you are. In my case, you know, jazz or Latin music. Yeah, kind of feeds other people. They kind of get that energy and they come down. But it always starts with like you, your mate, your other mate, his girlfriend, the other mate's brother, and then their mates come down. And before you know, if it's good and people enjoy it, it just organically grows. Definitely. I find like if you try and buy your way into something, it's not authentic. You know, like you have a load of money and you want to buy your way into a scene or start a night. you know, I kind of feel the best things always start like that, like really small, organically and grow.
Agree. Definitely, definitely. So at what point did that, so were the people you're working with at the time what turned into the Dig family then? Or how
Yeah,
did
so the Dig family was me and one of my oldest mates, Chico. We go back to punk rock days in Bradford.
nice.
He's not really Latin. He's called Chris Murphy. So when we go into Latin music, we just give him a nickname, Chico Malo, which means bad boy. So me and Chico, we were just went to Leeds to that place, the Coconut Grove,
Mm,
hustle a gig for our Latin jazz band, Sonando. And the owner of the place is called Jip Damone. And he'd been running this night for a few years. He owned the place. And we just met up, the three of us. And you know straight away, you know, when you meet someone and you just bond,
yeah.
the three of us bonded. We're all dressed in our 3-button Italian 1960s suits. Jip was
Nice.
wearing a fedora. We all had the jazz beards. You know, we're all, he's playing the records between, you know, and we'd say, oh, wicked record, man. And we're all drinking Jack Daniels and Coke. Like, we're in the Goodfellas or something, you know. But that was the roots of the Dig family. We didn't call it that at first. That came a few years later. But me and Chico started working with Jip on the Wednesday night jazz nights, and then he gave us our own night on Mondays. He said, "Do you want to do a weekly residency
Nice.
with our band?" So we kind of made a little offshoot band called the Afro Blue Quintet,
Right.
and had a jam session. And that's when the College of Music kids were coming down and sitting in. So that Dig family thing, we started calling our nights Dig around 87, 88. But it was really sort of post 1990 that Jip came up and started calling, you know, with that whole thing of the Dig family.
Right.
But that decade was a whole new thing, man. That was the acid jazz era. And
Oh.
that was the era of hip hop jazz, you know, jazz rap.
Mm,
And things changed from that scene that I was in the 80s. Things kind of evolved. It's like the house music thing kind of killed off the jazz dance thing a little bit.
really?
Huge.
Mm,
You know, it's a tsunami that just swept the UK music scene. But the jazz kind of underground jazz dance scene kind of went off and started being a little bit more funky and playing less kind of more straight ahead jazz and
right.
Latin jazz, and it just became a bit more open minded. And suddenly nights are playing like funky jazz, jazz funk, hip hop jazz, you know, Afro beats started coming in, and it became much more of an open scene because the jazz dancing was like, it's like break dancing. It's it's an art form to break dance. You can't just get up and bust some moves.
Mm,
Jazz dancing was similar, but the acid jazz scene was open, you know, anybody come down, shake
right.
your foot. And that scene took off crazy. You know, that was like
Were you involved in the dancing at all? Were you more the music side?
dude, I can't dance.
Were you not? Okay,
No, I wish I could because I always wanted to be a dancer, but I can't dance salsa, which is a crime in my salsa scene. I could never dance like break dancing. Is just something I watch because
it looks hard. It looks hard for sure.
You know, and jazz dance, I shuffle a little bit and do a few steps, but when you see the jazz dance guys go off now, no, I'd just rather be on this side of the turntable.
Fair enough. No,
making that happen. Because that's the buzz for me is when you drop that tune and the dance floor just goes boom. You know, like when you're MCing.
Yeah.
You know, you just hit
it's
some bars and the crowd just, oh, you've got a chorus and you know you're doing that and the crowd. It's that moment when you hook them in and you really
definitely. No, that's the best feeling, man. That's the best feeling.
I think that's what I think all of us who are on this music performing side, you know, whether we're DJs or musicians, MCs, singers, it's that buzz of that moment. You know, and you watch like huge stars talking about, you know, people that fill arenas, but it's still for them. There's that buzz. Or whether it's you at the bars club or me nowadays not DJing so much, but if I'm in a salsa club and I drop that tune and you just the place, you can feel the energy go. Boom.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's such a beautiful thing, and I think I've been learning more through the last few years of live performance. It's just like when you can really reach a new level, and if it's new music that you just made, or a tune you've just found or something, it is beautiful to really be able to get that crowd reaction and like just take it to a new height each time. Definitely.
I think we appreciate it so much more after this pandemic. You know, when we were shut down, how much we miss live music,
So
or
true.
me DJing for people in clubs, or you know, just me as an individual going to see live music. It's like the other part of it as an audience. You know, it's that appreciation. Like yesterday, I was like, my jaw was hitting the floor. You know, some of the solos that I was watching.
Nice.
You know, it was like, again, that's them communicating to us. I'm on the other side now, and that's that their music touching me. You know, so it's all like, you know, in it, we all link. You know, in one huge form.
Nah, it's a beautiful thing for sure. So I was wondering, so like throughout that time, when did it then evolve into like Jazzland, Resoul, Sunday Joint?
So it's interesting. So the 90s was just crazy. Again, it's very similar to what I see today. The way the Leeds scene is buzzing now, this last 4 or 5 years. So the 90s was the same. There was a whole generation of young players came up in Leeds at the same time from the music college. And that was kind of across the UK, the acid jazz thing was way bigger than the previous decade jazz dance thing. It was more overground and more popular, right? So that kind of tailed off in the 2000s, and that's when I disappeared a little bit from the jazz scene and the soul scene and stopped doing live gigs. I went off to do my salsa thing for about 7-8 years, all over Europe, went to Singapore, DJ in Los Angeles, you know, great times. About 2009-10, I missed live music. I just wanted to put gigs on again. And I started little gigs, little things in little places in Headingley, a place called the Head of Steam now. It was called something else about 2000. And so upstairs, I started a little night every Sunday called Sunday Sermon. We just live bands, me DJing, free entry. And when I did that, 2010, 11, I started to meet another new young generation of musicians at the college.
Nice.
They were all coming, and I will be playing like Spanish Joint by D'Angelo, and they'd be like, "Oh, tune, man!" And I play a Fela Kuti tune, and I play a Dilla tune. You know, I mixed it all up. They were really into. They were just 20 years old, but they were musically so mature, man. You know, and into all these things. And then they were saying, "Oh, have you heard of Flying Lotus?" And they were like, you know, they were turning me on to sort of stuff. And I could see there's something going on here because there's quite a bunch of musicians. There was a young group, all played in each other's bands. And I just wanted to I wanted to give them a platform. I thought this needs to be heard.
Amazing.
So in 2012, I went back to the wardrobe where I'd been promoting years ago, and I started a night called Soul Rebels.
Okay.
Which was our catchphrase was from Fela to Dilla and beyond. So it was jazz, soul, hip hop, Brazilian music, reggae, even, you know. So it was like all my favorite music, and I started putting a lot of these bands on. And one of those bands was Nubian Twist, who was still a student band. You know,
were they a student band in Leeds?
Mate, they started at the Leeds College of Music in their second year in 2011. Their first ever show was October or November 2011 at the Hi-Fi Club, right? So that's why they always have a lot of love for Leeds. Their drummer Finn, he still lives in Leeds. Sax player Nick Richards has come back after living in London. But yeah, so it was bands like that. Another band was the Roller Trio, who are still going today. Who else was a Paper Tiger? A whole bunch of bands at that time. Really interesting bands. And so I started this Soul Rebels night, and it was just, it took off, you know. And before long, I'm booking our bands as well as some touring bands from London. And then I started booking people like Jose James, New York neo soul singer, Omar, legendary London soul singer from the 90s. I started putting Brazilian groups on. And Soul Rebels would eventually, at the end of it, 2017, 18, 19, I started putting on Coco Roco, Yusef Day's Trio, Ezra Collective. So that night, I think, was pretty pivotal in what we're doing now.
Sure.
But it started in 2012. And this whole UK jazz explosion really took off 2015, 16.
Okay.
You know, so but I feel we already had something going on in Leeds that was interesting, and all that generation I'm talking about, the Nubian Twist generation, they were into hip hop, electronic music, dub, massively into Afrobeat, jazz, and it was just refreshing to meet a new generation of players. And then that was going really well. And in 2015, I started this spin-off night called Resoul, which was a jam session. And, that was just a little place, doesn't exist anymore, Hurst Yard, and it was 100 cap. A bit like your bars club thing. It was a Monday night, but we did it once a month, few monthly as well.
Yeah, same thing. Mondays normally,
Monday night. And the reason we chose Mondays, loads of musicians, they don't work on a Monday. So they came to jam.
Nice.
And it started off basically me playing records or tunes and a jam session. But then some of the new bands that were coming through then wanted to do a set, like a half-hour showcase set. I mean, people like Tets de Poix, when they started, the guys who were now TC and the Groove Family had another band called Nectar. They all wanted to do a half-hour set. So we started doing a half-hour showcase set of Elcon bands with the jam session afterwards. And man, that was buzzing for the first year and a half.
Amazing,
Right, MCs. What was cool was we started getting MCs coming through. And they were from the hip-hop scene.
Do you remember any of the MCs that were doing it at that time? I'd just be intrigued if you do. If not, don't worry.
You know Zealey?
That rings a bell.
He's part of that 8 Manor crew, and
yes, I've been told about.
Zealey was there. There was there's guys at the college, and then guys were coming from outside the college. Guys who now are rapping at the Old Red Bus Station scene.
Nice, cool.
I remember that. I know Technico came through a few times. You know Technico?
Nice. Yeah, I've heard of him.
He's OG, sort of in the scene. And but many of them had never they never rapped with a band.
Right, okay.
And they were buzzed. You know, they were like, that's funny, just to be with the band playing those groups. Because we just take a Dilla beat and we just like the house band was on it, you know. And then we had loads of soul singers come through. You know, you had to do covers, but then we started towards the end of Resoul, we started to get the vocalists. Have you got a tune of yours? And the band would learn it.
Nice.
It's a nice scene, but mate, it was never about the money, but it got to a point where it was everybody was busy. You know, the house band, they're all in Tets de Poix or the Zongo Brigade, or they started getting really busy. And then we lost our second venue. I tried to get it going at the what do you call it, the Hi-Fi Club as part of Sunday Joint. Just did a few, and then of course we shut down for 18 months because of the pandemic. Sure. But that was a cool thing. I'm thinking of reviving it, to be honest.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds amazing.
I mean, I'm not sure if I've got so many young soul singers now, neo soul singers. There's just a generation of talent at the college right now.
Definitely.
And I can't get everybody into the Sunday Joint. You know, I just don't have enough gigs. So I thought I'll do some Resoul showcases.
Nice.
And maybe just do them as gigs. And then we'll see whether I can get a house band together and start getting guests, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was definitely, I mean, Resoul called Resoul, but we did a lot of jazz. The funny thing is, when we did the hip hop, rappers loved it. But shredding, man, they were like, oh,
nice.
You know, jazz, you know. And then the jazz musicians would come down to sit in, and as an MC doing about 133 bars, you know, just on and on and on.
That's it.
Time out, dude. Have to 8 bars.
I remember that feeling, man. I remember the first time that I'd got up with a band. It was such a different experience because obviously you're normally just used to beats, so it's just like, you know, you have your beat,
the loop in it. You
the
just
band doesn't end, so you can just keep going. It's yeah.
It was fun. I mean, it was MCs, but they learn quickly, right? They learn. Yeah, if you've never, like you say, you've never been with on stage with a band. Yeah, I mean, it's different with you now. You've got a band. You know how it works. You kind of think like a musician. But like, you know, what would happen is we'd have an MC rhyming, and I kind of go, time out, you know.
Yeah.
So he'd stop rhyming, and the sax player would start soloing. But after about, you know, 16 bars, the rapper would come back in on top of the sax solo.
Nice. Sorry, someone keeps knocking on my door. Be 1 second. Yeah, see, but yeah, definitely, it's really interesting to hear about like the emergence of MCs kind of like coming into the scene at the time, and how it's kind of. When did you first see it start translating into like rappers performing with bands as a thing? Like, who was kind of the first?
Yeah, but I mean, because I've been in this scene for like since, you know, Jurassic times, right? I know the history. The early rappers were the early New York rappers, like, you know, the Furious Five, Three. They rapped over live bands, like live band recordings.
Right.
Before the whole kind of sampling and cut up started. So I knew about that, but then the 90s, really, it was the Roots. The Roots really changed everything. You know, here's a live band playing those hip hop beats and loops on instruments, not samples, and then Black Thought over the top, you know, like you know, on the top of that. And we started to see hip hop bands, you know, or bands with MCs, acid jazz era. And then when did it happen here? I can't remember. I just remember about, I don't know, after 2015, 16, at Resole, some of the rappers that were coming through started to collaborate with some of the bands. So there was a rapper called Pico Fabrice, who's like he's a French Caribbean dude, but he came to some Resoles, and then he's on this album by Guard Dog. He came to their gig, jumped up with them, and they said, let's go in the studio. So like recorded a track with him. Otis as well. Otis came to a few things. Did a couple of things for me, just him and backing tracks. And then I don't know how he met Tets de Pois, but the next thing he's on one of their singles.
Sure.
You know?
Nice.
So I mean, yours, I think, it's probably the first in many years of a full band with an MC leading the band.
Because my first introduction was Project Hilts.
I forgot about Project Hilts. Sorry, man.
That was
Danny's going to see this, and he's going to get the police come up from London. Project Hills, that forgot. Sorry, man. I gave them their first gig at the Wardrobe. You were probably there. It was Resole upstairs in the bar on a Monday night. And Danny had been to a few Resoles, but he hadn't got up, and he said, can we do a showcase? And we used to get 80, 90 people at Resole. I put Project Hills on, 180 people turned up. They jumped the stage, man.
That's crazy for a first gig. Yeah, they're amazing.
No, that was a really interesting project, because he was coming from the grime side.
Yeah.
Like, once I talked to him, and he told me, like, you know, Hilts, and I looked him up on YouTube, and he was in that crew, was it the Square or something like that, one of those London crews. Square, I think they were called. He's doing he's only about 16, 17, doing these grime videos, 20,000 hits and that.
Yeah.
Danny came to study production at Leeds and met all these amazing musicians and singers, and just thought, I want to do a live band version of it. And so it was good, because he brought in so many different musicians from different, you know, we got like Glenn on piano, he's into free jazz. You know, then you had Lizzie and Liv on vocals, pure neo soul queens, you know.
Yeah.
It was great. And forgotten the sax player's name, but you know, Felix on trumpet and
Yeah, yeah.
uh, it was a great vibe, and yeah, they were pretty different at the time. Did you get inspired by seeing them?
Yeah, 100%. So it was Project Hilts, and it was Nick's Northwest's band that went by the Young Wizard at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
I
yeah.
saw them in Sheffield, and that was the first hip hop live band show I'd ever seen. I was like, what? Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I was like, this is crazy. And then yeah, when I moved to Elcom from Sheffield, I and went to Project Hilts' Sunday Joint,
Yeah, yeah.
and I was just blown away, man. I was absolutely blown away, and just like seeing the response from the
Yeah.
crowd as well to like live hip hop and live, but just the energy was just different, and I think that 100% inspired me to get together this band. And yeah, luckily through the through the Elcom scene, like was able to get them all together. But yeah, so it's nice to hear from you about how you know, how Danny got into it and then like seeing how
Well,
that's
I think
inspired this generation, I
what
guess.
it's like, you know, Danny came from making beats on his laptop and you know, just MC,
Yeah,
DJ,
same.
and
Yeah.
then came to Leeds to wanted to better his production skills, you know.
I did the same thing.
But there you go. But
Yeah.
that's a really good thing that Leeds Conservatoire College of Music as
Yeah,
it was. It does draw people like yourselves to come
definitely.
to do production. But when you come here and you meet these musicians, you're in that environment with all these musicians. I mean, this is what I keep saying about Leeds College of Music Conservatoire is that I don't know how many people come every year, 1,000, I don't know, 500, but they come from all walks, all different musical spectrums and genres. So you've got classical music people there, you've got people studying folk music, you know, you've got songwriting, you've got opera, you've got jazz, rock players, soul, hip hop, grime, and you're all in this little kind of cauldron, you know, musical cauldron.
Definitely.
All these ideas, and you meet people,
Yeah.
and you collaborate, and some things work, and some things might not work, so you move to the next thing. So yeah, I forgot about Nick's Northwest. So Nick's was part of the Resoul thing with the pre TC and the Groove family band called Nectar.
Nice. Yeah.
Nick's he is a demon keyboard player. He's an amazing. Oh man, you know, he's he's up there like in that Kamal Williams vibe, you know, Henry Boo, it's a Kamal trio. But then in the middle of a Nectar gig at Resoul, he jumped up from the keys and grabbed the mic and started rapping.
Nice.
I turned around to, like, you know, everyone, what? And then he kind of, when TC started, he was in the band early on, and he was still doing that. And then he formed his own band, but then he moved back to London. I've not had the chance to book him. He's been on my hit list since we reopened.
He's doing really well. Yeah.
Mate, his singles are so good. That last one was it, Satan Don't Swim, whatever. With I've been playing that at Sunday Joint.
Yeah. Nah, it's brilliant, man.
I want to get him on because it's all the crew. His band are all Leeds crew that were from that generation of Resoul. They all play with the Highway and TC and the Groove family. But yeah, I just like, I think that a live hip hop band MC with live musicians just got so many possibilities.
Definitely.
It's like Project Hills. Danny was bringing in Latin music elements, you know, Latin music, because they just went into this big salsa piano bit, you know, and then you know what I mean? It's not just like head nod.
No, sure.
Because that would get a bit monotonous. But you know, when you open it up like that,
definitely.
You know, and when he dropped the what you call jazz grime, that's what we named me and Danny. You know, at times grime. It was pretty different.
Yeah, 100%.
A live band doing the grime thing.
Definitely. Yeah. Nah, it was beautiful seeing those genres transition, I guess, and like just seeing things that I hadn't ever seen done before. And I think there's such it's such an open culture in Leeds where like there's so much collaboration and so much fusion that I think like it's just unlike anything anything I've ever seen really. But I guess one question that like stems on from that is like, have you had much kind of, I guess, collaboration or like communication with other scenes in the country, like the London scene, for example? Because I know the jazz scene in London's huge as well, and I know that people kind of cross over from Leeds to London. So like, did that happen with you at any point with like Leeds and
Oh,
London?
mate. So going right back to even the 80s, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm involved in like this underground scene, right? When it's a small underground niche scene, you
Hmm.
tend to know people doing the same thing in the next city. So
Sure.
in the 80s, even we linked up, and the 90s especially. But you know, we had kind of brother promoters and sister promoters. You know, in Sheffield, in Manchester, in Liverpool, in
Sure.
Edinburgh, Newcastle, Bristol,
Hmm.
and we would go and DJ their nights. They would come and DJ our nights.
Nice.
We would send our Leeds bands to their gigs. They would send their Bristol or Manchester bands to our gigs. So there's always been this kind of unity, you know,
Nice.
and it sort of continued to this day. I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of Leeds musicians finish at Elcom. They stick either they go home back to where they came from, wherever city that is, or the second thing is they stick around Leeds forever, which is good because that kind of grows our scene. Then that's sort of forever new musicians coming in, which is brilliant,
Hmm.
stopping up our scene, making it stronger. And the third thing is people move to London. So I book London bands and I see, you studied at Elcom, like
Right.
for example, Nubian Twist, obviously.
Sure.
Sons of Kemet, drummer.
Right.
Shabaka Hutchins' drummer, Eddie Wakiki Smith. He played the first ever Soul Rebels.
Wow.
He was in a band called Area Astrobeat Orchestra. Ashley Henry, pianist, amazing young jazz pianist. He did his first degree in London, did his postgrad at Leeds College of Music.
Oh wow.
So there's this interaction, I look in the lineups of a lot of those London bands and I'm like, oh, Elcom.
Interesting.
But that's also good because they then tell like bands they're playing in Leeds, man, we've got to go play Leeds.
Nice. Yeah.
Well, like yesterday, we had this great young tenor saxophonist flautist, Emma Rowich, and her quintet. She's a phenomenal sax player from London, but she's got links with Fergus Quill from Tight Lines and that. They're playing the same National Youth Jazz Orchestra. And he switched me on to her. She contacted him and said, I'm doing a 25-day tour to launch my album. I got to play Leeds. So people know about Leeds, in the scene. So yeah, there is really strong links. I mean,
Nice.
I got mates in London. I've been working in this game so long that you kind of know what's going on there.
For
That's
sure.
why I brought Ezra Collective in 2017 to Brood, on the Monday night.
Nice.
They were just about to break out. I just wanted to put them on because I just knew they were our kind of thing. Boko Roko is another one. Yusuf Kamal Trio, all these bands. So there's a two-way kind of interaction.
Nice. No, it's interesting to hear that because I know I knew a bit about the crossover, but I didn't realize it was so intertwined, like you're saying.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, we got good links with Sheffield, like with the KOG and Franton family, Otis, and Leeds now. Tom Excel's living from Nubian Twist is living in Sheffield, so we've got strong links there. We've got really strong links with Manchester. A lot of bands. Again, people been to Elcom, go back to Manchester. They're always welcome to come back here and play. So yeah, I think that kind of music that we tend to be more of a extended family.
Definitely.
The kind of music, that underground jazz, hip hop, soul, global beats. So yeah,
amazing. I guess to kind of round it off, what I'd like to do with this podcast is really let people know how they can kind of come and get involved in the scene and what gigs are going on and what venues to come and check out if you didn't really know anything about the scene here. So if you could kind of just let me know about some of the Sunday joints coming up, some of the Jazzland sessions and the other things you've got going on, just for people that might want to get involved.
So I would say if you're a young musician and you love jazz, soul, hip hop, global beats, and you want to take, if you're sort of 16, 17, 18, come to
Mm,
Leeds College of Music, or sorry, Leeds Conservatoire,
sure.
because it's such an amazing place. And I hope they slip me the £200 check now.
No,
But
I'd say the
seriously,
same thing. I'd say
you know, it is a pretty inspirational place. You will come here, you'll meet great people, you'll make great music, and it will be like a good sort of first step in your musical career, right? So that's one thing. The venues where you can hear this kind of music were into jazz, soul, hip hop, global beats. My own gigs are at the Broodnell Social Club under the Jazzland Sessions banner, and also DJ Lubi Presents. Sadly, I'm about to just finish in June and have a break for 2 months, so I'm going to be
Sounds like
off
you deserve it, man.
in about September. And also, we're taking a break for summer with Sunday Joint at the Hi-Fi Club. So, yeah, the Hi-Fi Club every Sunday for 20 years, 22 years has had the Sunday Joint, which is a free entry live music thing, all for emerging up and coming bands, you know. And that I took that over, booking, promoting the acts, DJ and hosting in January 2020. So that's about to take a break, and we'll be back at the end of September.
Nice.
With loads of new, fresh, young bands coming out of Elcom, and also it's not just about the College of Music bands. You know, I do book outside groups as well.
For sure.
That Hyde Park Book Club, definitely, where you do your legendary bars club section. But that is really a hub of not just music, but like wider cultural stuff as well. They've got a weekly Hyde Park Jazz Club, but there's so many gigs there. I don't know, there's poetry readings, there's all sorts of stuff.
That's great. I think that's a good list for someone to go on, for
that's
sure.
To start with, you know, I mean, I could go on and on, but the main thing is, no, but you know, there's the kind of music that we dig, you know, I mean, we Wardrobe, Hedrow House, Belgrave Music Hall, some stuff at Wharf Chambers, yes, Domino Club, if you're kind of going for the more mainstream jazz stuff. There's loads of places, the lending rooms. I mean, that is the beauty, Yusuf, of Leeds, is there's so many of these little small venues. I talk to promoters in Sheffield and Manchester, and I don't know if you've got the same spread of venues where you can do your first gig in a 50 capacity place and move to a 100 cap place, then a 150, then 200. You know, you can work your way up the ladder.
So true. Yeah.
So that's the beauty of the city. I think not just for our music, I'm talking about all music.
100%. I've seen especially working at book club, I've seen every different type of music and thing that you can imagine. Yeah, honestly, I think the scene's just so open, as we were saying before, and just like anyone, I know we've talked predominantly about jazz and hip hop, but then at the same time, like, you could come here pursuing any art form, can't you, and thrive.
Anything. You can do death metal, right? I mean, I think this all comes back to Leeds having a really strong DIY culture.
Sure.
Of especially in the music scene, but other aspects of life. But in the music scene, you just get up. I want to do it. I'm going to do it. There's a venue. Let's hire it. Me and some mates are going to put a night on. That's it. So I think that's a really strong point, which kind of brings everything together that we've been chatting about.
Definitely, it's amazing. So yeah, before we finish off, is there anything else you wanted to speak on or touch on before? Or
no, just thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Oh, of course, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My long career.
It's been so interesting to hear all about it, honestly. Yeah.
And let's hope not just my career, but let's hope like the Leeds scene just keeps on
definitely
getting stronger and you know, and get people recognise that.
Yes.
And may it continue.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, please, anyone that's watching, make sure to come to some of DJ Lubi's events. You know, I've been to many myself, and it's definitely definitely a legendary thing in the Leeds scene. So yeah, thank you for coming along, and yeah, I'll stop the
Thanks,
recording.
bro.